Here's the question. What is the first money lesson you remember learning as a child, and who taught it to you? Welcome to the Black Father's Pulse, the podcast where fatherhood meets purpose. I'm Dr. Alvin Thomas, clinical psychologist and professor, here to guide you through the multifaceted journey of Black fatherhood. Please note, the views expressed here are my own and not those of my employer. But get ready to dive into the dynamic world of Black fatherhood, where we celebrate the highs, tackle the lows, and share plenty of laughs along the way. Let's keep the pulse of fatherhood beating strong and vibrant.
Yes, thanks for the question, Dr. Thomas, and thanks again for having us on. The number one thing that I would say I learned at a very young age from my mother, Tina, was the importance of being frugal.
Mm.
Uh, One of the things she impressed upon us is, the importance of a dollar
Mhm.
and really recognizing how she was able to navigate life raising the two of us and being very sort of diligent with how she used her funds. That was one of the most critical things that I learned. And for me in adulthood, what I recognized is irrespective of the amount of money that you bring in,
Mhm.
um, there is sort of this really important way to view it and recognize that just because you're earning more doesn't necessarily mean you need to spend more. That would be the most important lesson that I've learned at an
Excellent.
early age.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Yeah. Quentin, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked your brother earlier. And here's the question. What's the first money lesson you remember learning as a child, and who taught it
Yeah.
to you?
So I think the first money lesson I remember as a child was something along the lines of spend, save, giving. And like
Mm.
my vague childhood memory is it's some combination of my mom and maybe like Awana, like an after school type program. And it was very much centered on like you have some amount of money that you get every month and thinking about like those as categories that you can choose to allocate money to. And I don't really remember much about like there being a proportion of the money that you have to allocate. But like that there are kind of three choices you have when you get money. One's to spend it on like whatever you need and maybe some things that you want. One is to save it so it earns interest, but like maybe not. Maybe I wasn't aware of those concepts at the time. And then one is to give, and that could be giving it to your faith community or to charity or some such thing. So I think those are that's kind of what I remember. And I'd probably credit my mom, some combination of my mom and faith community for that kind of that bit.
Okay, excellent. Thanks. Welcome to the Black Fathers Pulse podcast, where we champion fatherhood through the stories and experiences of Black fathers in service to their children and families. Today, we have something special, twin brothers. I could barely tell them apart except for the haircut. Um, Both of them are also fathers in their own right, both also authors, both on a mission to change how Black families talk about money. With an MBA from the University of Iowa and dual bachelor's degrees in accounting and economics from William Jewell College in Liberty, Missouri, Mr. Quinlan Riser is a chartered life underwriter and chartered financial consultant. Additionally, he maintains a FINRA. I think that's he'll tell us about that in a little bit. An FINRA series 6 and 63 licenses, as well as an Iowa Life Accident and Health Insurance license from the Iowa Insurance Division. His brother, Dr. Quentin Riser, is an assistant professor in human development and family studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, specializing in how family characteristics and public policies affect children's cognitive and social emotional development. Welcome, Quentin and Quinlan, to the Black Fathers Pulse
Thanks for having us,
podcast.
Dr. Thomas. We really appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So I know each of you have similar but yet very disparate stories. And the book that we're here to talk about, your children's book that you just released, kind of brings your stories together, but also brings your different foci together. But before we jump into that, tell us, each of you, a little bit about yourself. Just a quick 60-second intro. Over to
Certainly.
Quinlan.
So I was born in Seattle, Washington, and spent half of my formative years there. We moved to Colorado Springs right around the age at which we entered middle school. So graduated high school from there. Then I went on to undergrad and studied accounting and economics. Got really interested in research while there. Went to Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa to continue my training. Ended up as a postdoc here. Throughout that grad school and postdoc experience, I had 3 children, the lovely Eden Riser, then came Nazareth Riser, and then Jordan Riser was born right here in Madison, Wisconsin, where I'm at currently. I've been on the faculty in the School of Communicology for 2.5 years now. I really enjoy my work centering on how to think about what kinds of conditions help families and children to develop optimally. So that's me in a nutshell.
Excellent. Thank you. And Quinlan?
I would say that the interesting thing is my story was very similar up until graduating undergrad. Same journey from Seattle to Colorado Springs, and then to William Jewell College, where we both graduated. Where we sort of started to go in different down different paths was when I moved up to Des Moines to start working at Principal Financial Group, where I spent 9 years of my career during that time doing my MBA at the University of Iowa, and really that's where my passion as well as experience and knowledge grew as it relates to financial services. So when you think about wealth management and insurance and some of the concepts we talk about in the book, for the first 10 years of my career, that's where that was really developed. And outside of work, getting into the community, having conversations with individuals, and recognizing that a lot of this information that we share in the book isn't commonly discussed. There are people that need the information, but they're not necessarily privy to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that set me on a journey really to look at my career in 2 different ways. The career of the job that I go to every single day, you show up at 8 o'clock, you leave at 6, but also going out into the community and sharing this knowledge through seminars, through just engaging with the youth and really trying to get them to understand the importance of early recognition of some of these concepts and then really act on it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So let's talk about something a little bit unique here. One of you is a biological father, and one is what we would call a social father, both, well, through your mentorship, through your community work, but also as being an uncle. How do those different perspectives shape how you think about financial legacy?
Yeah, sure. I can go first.
Mhm.
And I think, I've had the tremendous fortune of being able to see my brother as a father, an incredible man, raise his 3 kids, and recognizing all the effort that that takes. And it's been that just personally has been really incredible to see and witness and see how sort of they take after him and his leadership in that way. From my perspective, being outside of the family home, but also recognizing the importance of, you know, my niece and nephews growing up and sort of being successful in all their endeavors. Quentin and I, and we don't necessarily cover this in the book, but we talked early on about building funds, 529 plans that will help them sort of get a ahead of the game in
Mhm.
terms of when they get to school, there's dollars there for them. And so distantly seeing sort of their growth, seeing their curiosity, seeing their interest, but also, um, us being able to partner in a way, as the fun uncle, um, really trying to give them, uh, leveraging the knowledge that we have to give them a leg up. Um, has just been really a nice sort of thing for me to be able to do as a social father, as you call it,
Mhm.
but the fun uncle, as I would refer to it as.
That's kind of how I see myself, the fun uncle.
Yeah,
I swoop in, get them hyped up, and
that's
leave.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Quentin,
Yeah,
how does
I
that
think it's
work for
funny,
you?
and I kind of combine those 2 terms and come up with a bit of a hybrid, and I call it funkle. Um, but very early on, especially when I
Uh,
was living in Iowa, and Quinlan was living in Iowa as well, I kind of thought my kids saw us interchangeably. Like here's Quinlan. It was no
Mhm,
different. And to
mhm,
this day, they are really, really close with Q. I think what is interesting is as I was doing my doctoral training and Quinlan was pursuing more of a finance career, there was a time where
mhm,
I was foregoing sort of normal wages to go through grad school, and at that time,
mhm,
my kid's social father, Quinlan, was the one who was contributing to
mhm,
their 529 plans. And it's kind of cool to see it come full
mhm,
circle because we got together during holiday break and opened gifts and exchanged gifts. And we have these really neat Eden's Money Magic bookmarks. And so one of the
mhm.
gifts that Quinlan gave them as their social father was bookmarks with the amount to date that they have in those accounts. And so I
Wow.
like that was really meaningful to me, and we both contributed to it at points. But it was really, his belief and his counsel, because I go to him for financial advice,
Mhm.
that got that started very, very early. Um, and so that it can now take advantage of time and mature. And when they get to college, they'll have a good nest egg to be able to buy books and room and board and such. And so I think it's really been cool because I always think of it as like, yeah, you have a parent A and a parent B, but it really does take a village.
Mhm.
And, you know, Ken, fictive Ken, all of the people involved have really helped to raise my kids, and the funkle, the social father, has been one of the most influential folks I think in my kids' lives for sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think we're going to keep using that word funko for now. Until YouTube blocks us for for misinterpreting that word. Um, so why now? What was that exact moment when you both said we need to write this book? Paint us a picture. When did that happen for
Yeah,
you
so I
guys?
can start off with this one um, because it's kind of one of those things that becomes on a small scale the stuff of legend. I remember like
Right.
Quinlan was off at work late at night, and we roomed together during this time when we were both in Iowa. And I would, get home from a day of grad school, and I remember one day he came in with a stack of children's books that he purchased Barnes and
Mm,
Noble, Amazon, I don't know where, and he was like, "There are decent children's books that talk about finances, that talk about investing, that talk about estate planning, but none of them really cater to the communities that we see ourselves sort of trying to influence." Um,
right.
and he started like drafting and coming up with ideas of concepts to cover. And so this was really like nearly a decade ago now that he
Oh
came up
wow.
with this idea. And at the time it's like, well, we're still very early in our careers, and so we need to sort of start to get solidified. But we had very early drafts then, and we've come back to it every once in a while during the holidays or some such thing. So that's kind of where it started. It's the origin story goes quite a bit back. Um, I still have some original outlines and stuff like that. But yeah, that's
Mhm.
kind of the origin story as I tell it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and I would echo that. And I think the interesting thing for me, with coming in with, I think there was a board game that I brought into that related to sort of financial
Mhm.
literacy for the youth. And one of the things that I recognize, and it's sort of when we talk about the multi-generational approach to this book, a lot of that was informed by this.
Mm,
I would meet with individuals, and when we were doing seminars, and they would not necessarily have the knowledge to be able to engage in the conversations. It was as if it was new information. But they'd also have their kids there
mm,
attending the meetings and sort of listening in. And you could see the curiosity. You could see that the kids were engaged just as much as the individuals. And at that moment, it's like a light bulb clicked on where I said, how great would it be if we could do something, one that allows that child to engage with their parent
mhm,
and ask the right questions and be able to use the terminology that we give them through literature and say, here's disability insurance. Mom, dad, do you have disability insurance? Long-term care, even these sort of concepts, giving them the language to engage with their parents, but also thinking about that child when they reach their parents' age, having learned that information very early on, and being able to engage with someone like myself, a financial professional, and sort of be able to speak the same language. So you're already sort of prepared for that conversation coming into it
Mm-hmm.
because you learned it at such a young age. And that really sparked that thought to say, there are financial professionals that's been 20, 30, 40 years sitting down with clients and engaging with them and sharing this information. What if we can wrap that up into a book and several series of content that gives them that information that it takes years to learn, that they can read in, a couple of days. And they can leverage that when they move throughout their lives, when they're 18, when they're 22, when they're thinking about, their financial livelihoods, and say, hey, I'm going to, as a result of something I learned very early on and that was impressed upon me throughout my entire youth, I'm going to make financial decisions based on that. Whereas today, I feel like a lot of what folks are doing is they're reacting to sort of the dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
They get into a company and the HR says, well, you should defer to your 401k, you should invest. You might have some life insurance, you might have some disability insurance. What we want with this book is for that individual that gets into that role to already know sort of what some of those decisions might look like for them and how
Mm.
beneficial it can be to act on those decisions.
So what I'm hearing is there's a little bit of a hidden curriculum in there, that the conversation is about finances. The conversation is about insurance and all of that wonderful stuff, but that there's also some other skills and experiences that are being built in, being, for example, being able to advocate for yourself, being able to identify specific financial resources, being able to bring up difficult or taboo conversations. Is that what you found as well, or what you're putting into the book as well?
Absolutely. And I've said this in several forums. I think the interesting thing about money and some of the concepts we discuss
Mm-hmm.
is within a family group and outside of a family group, when you're engaging with one of your peers or someone that you might run across, money is such a taboo subject.
Mm-hmm.
So is thinking about, even with life insurance, obviously the connotation is with that comes someone being deceased. But what we always talk about is we cannot control death, we can't control disability, but certainly what we can do is control how your family does as a result or following that event, right? So if something's going to happen, it's going to happen. But how much better off are you if you plan and you prepare for those events that we no one wants to see happen? No one wants to see their loved one sick or hurt. But certainly it's an easier burden to bear
Mm-hmm.
when you're not left financially destitute. And so these are the concepts that we want to impress upon people, and that we want people to really understand, because it does, it sort of n- it's not easy to deal with the hard things of life,
Right.
but certainly can soothe and smooth that path when those things do happen.
Yep. Yep. Excellent. Thanks. Quinn, you look like you were
Yeah.
thinking of
So,
jumping
and
in.
one thing that I've learned from my brother, I've sat in on some of his seminars and such, is that the earlier you think about life policies or like
Mm-hmm.
term policies, the better off you might be, because those premiums are going to be a little bit lower, maybe substantially lower, if you're healthy, right? And if you're younger, you're more likely to be healthy. And so the earlier people
Right.
are exposed to this concept, you may not plan on dying anytime soon, but it's going to be a more affordable premium if you plan as if you might die someday sooner. And so I think
Right.
we even address estate planning in the book, and we do. That was maybe one of the harder sections to write for the audience, but we want to sort of address difficult conversations early in youth. It's like when you're a young kid and your first close relative passes away and your parents come to you and they try to describe for you what that means in terms that you don't fully understand. You don't know what it means for someone to be absent permanently. We want to kind of bring those conversations to the forefront and give parents the tools through the sort of mechanism of money to kind of talk about these things, because it's better to know, because with that knowledge, we do believe that there's a possibility that some proportion of people who read the book will act and therefore be better off. And so I think that's kind of the hope. And I think we are, like, as the kids say, trying to put people up on game, so that we can have individuals in the communities that we care about and think a lot about generating wealth and having end of life expenses being taken care of, rather than people arguing about who's going to cover what. We really just want to strengthen the family unit by providing knowledge that will allow them to be more financially stable is kind of the objective.
So we heard a very very fleeting, almost a cameo of Eden, Jordy,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
Nas. Is is the uh, title character really
Yeah.
Eden, your
So
daughter?
it's funny because
Or maybe it was a
no,
composite. I
so
don't know.
it is Eden, and it's inspired by Eden,
Hmm.
and there are a couple of components to that, right? Like Eden,
Hmm.
and both of you on here, you are familiar with Eden, you know Eden, and like
Right.
like she's
Right.
endlessly curious, and I mean she
Yes.
is a consumer of knowledge, and she learns at a quick rate, she
Yeah.
retains information really well, and so like that part of the cat was influenced by her. And her favorite animal, as long as I can think back, has always been a cat. So it was kind of we kind of anthropomorphized her favorite character, and it's her. So it is her.
Right.
There are a couple of young black kids who or biracial kids who make cameos in the book, and their
Mhm.
names are Naz and Jordan in the book too, so they make an appearance. But the title is certainly uh, Eden, and the cat is the cat version of uh, my daughter. Yeah.
Of Eden. All right, excellent. I asked each of you to select one of your favorite pages or your favorite page from the book and give us a brief read from it, and then tell us why that page matters so much to you. And so we could probably
Hmm.
start with Quinlan and then come back
Sounds
to
good.
you, Quentin.
Sure, sure. And I'll read it. It's page 27. In the section of the book, it's part three, the unexpected and expected,
Hmm.
and it's on disability insurance. And I'll start reading. What if we get hurt and can't play? Asked Jordy. If you can't play because you're hurt, there's something called disability insurance. It gives you money to help you while you recover, Eden responded. It's like having a backup player on your team. They step in and help you out when you can't play, so you're always covered. How does it work? Asked Timmy. Disability insurance helps you cover your expenses when you can't work due to an injury or illness, explained Eden. It's like having a safety net to catch you when you fall. Sammy raised his hand. Is disability insurance only for grown-ups? Mostly, but it's important to know about it so you can be prepared when you're older, said Eden.
Hmm.
And why it's important to me is, again, when you hear individuals talk about insurance, we hear life insurance very often. One of the um, one of the things we stress in this profession is if you think about being sick, hurt, unable to work, from entering the workforce into retirement, 1 in 4 individuals become disabled. And again, people think, well, I fall off a ladder, I break my leg, I can't go to work, but it also can be mental neural issues that come about. There is a whole list of ailments that could lead you to be disabled. And one of the things that I think about often is your ability to save depends largely on your ability to go to work,
Right.
right? And this was actually shared with me, this story, an individual I sat down with years ago, probably over 10 years ago. They said, okay, Quinlan, I want you to imagine that you have a money machine in your basement. Every day you go downstairs to that basement, there's $1,000 waiting there for you. You go out into the world, you spend the money, you buy groceries, you take care of your bills, etc. You come back the next day, that money is sitting there for you. And they looked at me right in the face as I'm looking at you both, and
Hmm.
and they asked, would you insure that machine?
Hmm.
And I paused for a second. I said, yes, absolutely. If that's giving me the money that I need to go out into the world and pay my bills, certainly I'm going to insure that machine. And they looked at me and they said, you're that machine, right? Our ability to provide for our families largely depends on our ability to go out and earn money. And so the minute that something happens to us, when we can't go to work and earn that money, our families can be impacted by that. And so why I think this is important to stress at a young age is for future generations to recognize the importance of, we call it disability insurance or income protection. It's this is what allows you to build your nest egg. This is what allows you to provide for your family, this income that you're making. But the minute that you're no longer able to do that, that severely impairs your ability to provide for your family and to save. So this is something that, is really close to home for me. And we even debated, do we put this in the book? This is a concept that can be a little bit challenging to grasp. But again, going back to giving kids the language
Mm-hmm.
to be able to engage in those conversations with their parents, we thought we absolutely should put this in, because if nothing else happens other than a child goes up to their parents and says, "Hey, mom, dad, do you have disability insurance?"
Mm.
Then I think that's a win for that family, as well as us putting the literature out there, because they're able to engage in those discussions. And ultimately, if someone does not have a plan in place, that child and that family, that's who's impacted,
Right.
right? So I think that it just it means, a lot to me personally, and I really hope it resonates with the audience and the readers. And again, folks, act Hugh alluded to it earlier, the earlier the better. In almost any concept that we talk about, the earlier you invest, the earlier you decide, the better off you'll be.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
certainly. So
Quentin.
my favorite excerpt from the book is found on page 18, and it's on our conversation around credit cards. And it reads as follows. It says, "Now let's talk about credit cards," said Eden. "The credit card lets you borrow money to make purchases, and you pay it back later. Isn't that like getting free money?" asked Timmy. "Not quite," said Eden. "It's like borrowing a teammate's basketball. You have to give it back, and if you don't return it on time, you might owe extra, called interest. Credit cards are very convenient. You can use them to buy things online or in stores without carrying cash. Using a credit card responsibly helps build your credit history, which is important for future borrowing or buying a house," explained Eden. "Some credit cards offer rewards like cash back points or travel miles for every purchase you make, like earning bonus points in a game. But be careful," warned Eden. This is probably my favorite line in the book. "If you spend more than you can afford to pay back, it can lead to debt, which is hard to manage. It's like getting too many fouls and being benched. If you don't pay your balance in full each month, you'll have to pay interest, which can add up quickly. There can also be annual fees for using the card." I think this is very salient to me because, recent estimates would say that the average American owes somewhere in the ballpark, or that average household owes somewhere in the ballpark of $10,000 to $12,000 in sort of revolving household debt. And so we're all familiar with credit cards. Like I think it's something that most people know about. They know, what a line of credit is. They know that you can use it. I think sometimes, in the same way that we talk about the power of interest, using a metaphor of lilies in terms of accumulating wealth, it's important to also look at the sort of converse of that, which is the power of interest in accruing debt. And so I think that is really critical to me and important to me in conveying to our communities that you should only use as much as you can afford to pay back, or you should pursue interest rates that appear reasonable to you. And I know that there are people who think about places that charge usurious rates for small loans and such. And so I think it's really educating folks on the concept of interest, and how, in the same way that lilies and interest can work to your advantage, it can work to your disadvantage. And so really ensuring that you're a good steward of credit, and making sure that if, as we all do sometimes, you falter, that you can recover. You just need to sit down on the bench and have a drink of water. And so I think that to me is sort of something that touches just about everyone, and can, I think, help people begin to have conversations, parents with kids, kids with parents, and parents can start to think more about how they use their credit cards and whether or not they use them wisely, because addressing the sort of misconception that it's free money, I like to think of it as you're saying to your future self, you're going to pay this. And if we thought about every transaction in the noun, like, I want to go on this trip. Well, is your future self okay with paying back the interest that your present self says that right now that you're okay with, right? And so I think that's kind of what we want to communicate there, is to have people think about, the self now and the self in the future. And if, the decisions you're making today are going to be okay with yourself, a year from now or 2 years from now.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks. So, I mean, we've seen it in other communities that fathers, that parents, grandparents, uncles, whoever it is, pass on knowledge to their children or to their relatives. So if you have an uncle who's talking to you about the stock market, that is no longer something foreign and nebulous to
Right.
you. So the idea of investing in the stock market makes sense when you have your first $1,000 at your bar mitzvah or at your birthday or at your whatever. You think like maybe I could invest this money because the conversation around investing and whatnot has already been there. If you have somebody who's leaving you um, um, uh, a set of stock options. You've been listening to the Black Father's Pulse. I'm your host, Dr. Alvin Thomas. I'm a clinical psychologist, researcher, and director of the TriLab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Views shared on this podcast are mine or that of my guest and are not associated with the university. Original music for our series was composed and performed by Micaiah De Silva, artwork by Isabella Acra. The podcast is produced by me and is supported by the kind contributions of you, the public, and advertisers. Follow me on Twitter at Dr_AT758, that's Dr_AT758, or the Black Father's Pulse podcast on Instagram and YouTube. Subscribe to the Black Father's Pulse podcast wherever you do your podcast listening, and don't forget to share and leave us a positive review.